Hello and welcome to the Berkcast, the How to Train a Dragon podcast. I'm your host HC. With me is,
Wolf.
and today we had our fun last week. We talked about stuff that we usually don't talk about in this podcast. But today we are back to some How to Train a Dragon goodness.
I don't know what you're talking
And
about. That was a normal day. That was a normal week for us.
yeah. Anyway, so back on topic, we have as you guys might know, How to Train Dragon: The Hidden World released in very different times around the world. The official release date in America was February 22nd, but some places got it in January, some places got it in March. So after all of this, apparently the Blu-ray releases started to flow starting to go awry in places where the movie already hit the earliest. Therefore, we have new deleted scenes, and since we discussed the deleted scenes for the previous two movies, I think it only fits that we will chat a bit about the deleted scenes for the Hidden World, because in my opinion, they are the most interesting deleted scenes out of the three films.
Mm.
Kind of putting it out there. What do you think? Just general thoughts comparing to the scenes or to the deleted scenes of the other movies.
If I'm not mistaken, I mean, this has the most deleted scenes, if I'm not mistaken.
Um, obviously more than the first one, because the first one only has two scenes, which you could even argue made it to the film, just altered a bit. I think we also
Mm.
talked about it. With the second one, maybe the same amount.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, I would say that they are interesting, I suppose, in what they do. Like, there's a lot of, stuff there that I don't know if it would have inherently changed the movie in any major way, though.
Hmm.
Like, if you added some of this in some way.
Hmm. But there are, like, in terms of like this, at least with the second one, there were a few scenes where I said, you know what, I could see this working with the final film. Like, I could see how this could have fit and everything. With this one, I get like a lot of the scenes. There are a lot of like half of the scenes. I'm like, okay, I get why they changed that. I get why this was removed. But then the other half, it's like, you know what? I could have seen this fit in the final product. So, which is why I find this interesting, because considering how many considering how much work and thought was put into this final one, because it's the final one, and Dean has talked openly about how much feedback he's gotten over this specific movie, like how
Mm.
many, either it be from DreamWorks themselves or colleagues. He This is the one he seems to be the most open about actual criticisms he was given, to the point they even thought about bringing in a new writer to help him out. So watching these scenes with this with from that with that perspective, with that information in mind, it does kind of illustrate a different picture here.
Fair enough.
So without further ado, let's talk about the scenes themselves. So the first thing we have is an alternate opening. What did you think about this opening compared to the one we actually got?
I mean, it's fun, right? Like, it definitely, I think, shows off Hiccup and Toothless and kind of shows off all the new stuff Hiccup might have worked on. And it kind of shows off the armor being fireproof, stuff like that. Different things. It kind of shows how things have changed a little bit. But I do think the opening we got, right, like for the movie and everything, shows that a lot better than this does, right? Because it shows us Berk. It shows us the Hiccup and the rest of the riders going out and rescuing dragons from the armada, from Drago's old armada and stuff like that. Like it shows us more of that. It shows us more of the world. This just shows us some random island and Hiccup interacting with the, I think it's the Crimson Gore Cutter. Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it shows us him interacting with him, and it kind of builds up that dragon a bit more. But that's about it. It's literally just him, Toothless, and that one dragon.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, kind of like what you said. I do prefer the opening we got in the final movie for one, because not only does it give you Hiccup and Hiccup's evolutions, with the armor being fireproof and more interactions with Toothless and stuff, and we also get more of the other riders, which I think is a great thing. That because one of the common complaints about the second movie was that the side, the other riders were kind of just there with nothing too important to do.
Mm-hmm.
So in my opinion, the opening to Eden World kind of fixed that. So it's nice that they added them in, but also there's a thing that they're not just release. One, I like that they are actually saving the Crimson the.
Well, it's
I
not even.
still need.
Oh, you mean like the opening we got? They're saving the Crimson
Yeah,
Gore Cutter. In this
yeah,
opening, it's more.
they're saving it, and other dragons,
Yeah.
which helps with the idea that Berk is becoming overcrowded, because here it's
Mm-hmm.
just one new dragon that also kind of tries to kill Hiccup upon seeing him, which kind of goes against the idea. Yeah, it's a wild dragon, but then again, so is the Light Fury. So if he can tame, if he can tame this big beast, why would he tame the
Well,
thing that looks like Toothless?
I think it does show like the dragons don't just automatically listen to Hiccup, and I think that's a good thing to show. Like these are still wild creatures more often than not. Like they're not entirely tame when he finds them. So I think it
Yeah.
is a good thing to show that off, and this opening does show that better, I feel. But I would say that yeah, it just feels better to see these dragons being saved and not so much just found in the wild and Hiccup attempting to bring them back for no real good reason.
Because
Right? Like I
yeah,
think
because
finding the dragons in
because
the wild doesn't really flow with what they're setting up in the movie, as well as rescuing all these dragons and then bringing them back to Berk.
yeah, because at the end of the day, Berk is like a retirement home in a sense, and just like, would you get people that need a retirement home, or would you get people, or would you force people to go in there?
Well,
You know?
I can't say anything about what you just said because you completely went robotic on me.
Oh yeah, you're going robotic on me too.
All right, I think Discord was crapping itself a
Yeah,
bit
it's
there, but we seem to be
okay.
fixed. So if you want to repeat what you
Okay.
said.
Thanks, Discord. Anyway, and what I said is that you bring people into retirement homes when they need it. You don't force them to come there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get you.
Okay. One other thing I want to say about the open, I get what they were trying to do with this opening, and it's like because the main theme of this movie, like thematically, it's about Hiccup letting go of Toothless and learning to become more independent. That's basically what the climax is kind of about. That Toothless, he doesn't necessarily need Toothless, but Toothless just helps him bring out the best in him. So in this opening, it looks more like Hiccup needs Toothless in a sense. Like when he's going against the dragon, then he always says like, "I got this under control. I'm just showing dominance and stuff." But at the end of the day, he doesn't manage to tame the dragon until Toothless intervenes.
Yeah, it
So.
shows that he's still very dependent on Toothless.
Yeah, so this opening shows that he needs Toothless. In the opening we get the idea that, yeah, he's over relying on Toothless, but again, over relying. That's the main difference here.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't need him because even without Toothless, Hiccup is competent in this opening. Like he does manage to put up a lot of fight against the hunters. but then when he becomes overcrowded, he needs Toothless. That I can get. That he's over relying on Toothless because he knows Toothless will always be there.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you get to the ending where he lets Toothless go, and it's like, well, but now he's kind of fucked without Toothless. So that's that's another thing I prefer in the actual opening than this alternate one. Not a bad alternative, but I see why the actual opening was the best one to go with.
Agreed.
With that said, the next scene we have, which I'm fast forwarding them to see the name of, it's Automatic Tail. This is the scene that actually reached early animation stages and is
Mm-hmm.
and it's not and is not storyboarded. And the one thing I want to say about that is that seeing fast motion with rough animations is the funniest thing in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a moment where you see them that in the final movie it's supposed to be them fast forwarding through time, but with the rough animations it looks really off.
Agreed.
So what do you think about Automatic Tail?
It's basically just a montage of Hiccup building another automatic tail, a la Gift of the Night Fury, and it's like I get why this one was cut. It's not really needed. It's not really necessary. We've seen Hiccup build an automatic tail fin before. We've seen Hiccup build a tail fin before, right? Like we saw in the first movie, we saw the montage there of Hiccup building the tail fin for Toothless. I don't feel like we need another one of those. I get the idea behind it potentially, like another um like a parallel back to the first movie, and this time showing Toothless helping, and this time showing Toothless helping Hiccup build the tail. I get the idea behind it, but I think it's probably for the best that it was cut because it saves time and allows that time that this would have taken to be devoted towards something else.
Yeah, I agree, and conceptually I get what they were trying to do, like like how Tell the Date is basically forbidden friendship, only this time instead of Hiccup getting the trust of Toothless, it's Toothless getting the trust of the Light Fury.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of similar beats there, like that the that the domesticated one, let's go with that, tries to get close to the wild creature, and at the end it doesn't really work, and the wild creature goes to sleep upside down on a tree, and then the domesticated one tries to impress the wild one with a drawing, and there's the entire thing of stepping on the. So, but in that, there's something different here because it's different interactions between different characters, and for different reasons. Toothless, Toothless. Hiccup wasn't calling Toothless in the first one, so there
Mm-hmm.
is a different idea there, and also Hiccup like trying to give Toothless tips from the side. That also kind of puts another spin on it because there was no one to advise any of them in the first one. They were just going along with it.
Mm-hmm.
So this I can get, but this one is kind of like, yeah, it's the same scene of Hiccup building Toothless a tail. It's not there's not at the end of the day there's nothing really special about it that wasn't just worth seeing a few seconds of Hiccup making it in the final film. And what surprised me about this scene, though, is that they actually got to the animation stages with it. So, like, so somehow this is the one scene that took them the longest to get. It doesn't really belong, which I found
I think
interesting.
one reason would be right, like because this is a way for them to sell their animation work once more. Like DreamWorks has quite a few, I would say, parts in their movies where it's just silence and it's just them kind of selling their animation and their background music work, right? And I think this is one of those scenes that does that. Although there's other
Mhm.
scenes in this movie and scenes in this movie that have no talking,
Uh,
just animation and the background music. And I think they
mhm.
sell the animation a lot better than what this would have, right?
Mhm.
But
Agreed.
I think also, right, this might have been another way for them to show, like, Dean might have looked at this scene and said, this is a way for me to show that, Hiccup still relies on Toothless, right? Because Toothless is helping him build the tail fin throughout all this. Like, Toothless is a part of the creation of it. So it could
Hmm.
be, that could have been the thought. Like, this is just another showing of how Hiccup relies on Toothless, and how I want to, and how he wanted, and how Dean wanted to, kind of separate the two and show that he doesn't need him, but he does rely on him, right? But I think it,
Yeah.
it doesn't, even with that idea in mind, I don't think it really helps, you know, establish that as, you know, bleh. I don't think it helps establish that any more than certain other scenes do, and I think those certain other scenes establish that idea much better than this one does, right?
Hmm. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, and again, it's one of the when I try to look at it in the context of the entire film, this is the one scene that does feel off.
Mm-hmm.
Which brings us to, unless you have anything else to add on Automatic Tail,
Nope.
I don't. Yeah. So that brings us to one of my probably my favorite of the deleted scenes, and one I would say I would like to see in the final film, which is Protector versus Captor. This scene is basically, Hiccup shows Toothless like that he made him and the Light Fury like special, kind of like a
A love
special
nest.
love, yeah, a love nest for him and for Toothless and the Light Fury. And then, when Hiccup leaves it, Valka just comes back with a cloud jumper, and they share a talk, and that talk is what is is kind of what brought gives the scene its name, and
Mm-hmm.
also it's also one of my because they are talking about a lot of stuff that I actually like, and I think would have helped make the movie a bit stronger. Not that it's not strong as is, but stronger. Because for one, when Valka comes back, she tells Hiccup that Berk has been burned to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Which, this is something I've heard people talk about, that because, and correct me on this if I'm wrong, but in the books, Berk is destroyed, right?
Um, it's been a while. I honestly don't remember, but
Mm.
I think so. Yes, to some degree, at least, anyways.
Yeah, so one comparison, because I think out of all the movies, this is the one that has the most to do with the books in a sense because of the similar endings. But and one of the comparisons I saw is that in the books, Berk is supposedly destroyed, while in the movie, it's just, it's been attacked and it's in pretty bad shape. So people have brought up the idea that if Hiccup does make that decision to take all of his tribe and leave to another place and rebuild Berk someplace else, it will probably make it much more impactful if Berk was destroyed. So having that sentence there and something else we'll get to in a bit does kind of help set up the fact of and that they needed to leave Berk. It's not just leaving Berk for the sake of looking for the hidden wall. There is a reason for this. There
Yeah,
are there are consequences to Hiccup not giving up Toothless to Grimo, which I don't agree with, but you know what I mean. And then there's also the idea, and there's also the talk about Valka actually in a sense, talking Hiccup out of maintaining the Viking dragon utopia, which one which one is interesting coming from her
mm-hmm.
because you would think out of all the characters you would assume that she's the most supportive of the idea.
Yeah. I think this one feels a little bit off, in my opinion, coming from her. It's like
Mm.
we've not been around her long enough to see that kind of change, right? And the movie's not really established her as the kind of person to say, maybe I was wrong, right? So I think that's one reason why they didn't go with this, right? Because the movie's never established Volka as someone who's been willing to admit that she might have been wrong in what she did or thought. So,
Um, in a sense, one we can again. This is something with Valka in general, and that you can get the idea, but it's kind of because in the second one she does see how much Hiccup took from her. She's like, all this time you took after me, and where have I been? So like you can kind of tell that she knows she was wrong. She's not proud of it, but at the same time, she also kind of brushes it aside and tries to move on with her life.
fair enough. But I mean, in this sense, though, it's very much like, she's willing to admit that she might have been wrong about the idea of dragons and people living together, and that one, I don't think it works for her and her character, right? I personally.
Mm.
And so I think coming from her, this feels a bit off, but also at the same time, right? It's like I would have liked to have seen Volka and Hiccup interact a bit more in the third movie. But if I'm not mistaken, like something similar to this, to this scene comes from Astrid later on in the movie itself instead, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but regarding what you said, for once I agree that I would love to see a bit more of Hiccup interacting with Valka in this movie, and this scene kind of gives that and gives it. But also, uh, well, there's something you said that you don't necessarily see that these words coming out of Valka, considering what we got to know, which it's debatable because she does mention in this scene that yeah, she tried to kind of make a utopia of her own in with the Bewilder Beast with Omelette, and and that didn't end up well because Drago did eventually find her.
Mm-hmm.
So so like I think the idea there is that it's not that she doesn't want it, it's not that she doesn't want it to succeed, but she's aware that and she also says greedy humans find ways. And she just tries to tell Hiccup, listen, it's great that we want this utopia, but you also need to understand there will always be threats, which kind of makes it fit a bit more with the ending that because one complaint I keep hearing about this movie, which I think we also mentioned this in our review and also watching it with a few friends. The one complaint everyone seems to is that this movie is a bit rushed to getting to the end. Getting to the ending is the ending, as beautiful as it is and as earned as it is, could have been earned a bit more if we actually talked about this. If we actually sat down, we actually sat down and discussed that maybe this utopia can't exist at this time, which is why we need to let the dragons go.
That's fair. That's a fair complaint, I think. I think this scene, personally, for me, like I said, I just don't think it works coming from Volka, perhaps. I think a scene like this would have been good in the movie. Like, getting more of a talk like this from the movie, from like within the movie itself, maybe not from Volka specifically, but within the movie would have been great and would have been enjoyable. And like I said, I would have enjoyed seeing Volka and Hiccup interacting a little bit more. But, trade offs and balance, you have to, let go of something in order to do something else within the movie since finite time and all that. But like I said, I just don't think it works coming from Volka personally.
Okay, so yeah, you you agree with the ideas of the scene, but not the right character.
Yeah, not who they come from.
Um, okay, so we have this, and another thing I found. But again, there's a same. That's why I like this, and there's a lot to talk about and extract from this.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the name of it is essentially protector versus captor,
Mm-hmm.
and the reason for this is that Volka does bring up a good point that the line between a captor and a protector is pretty thin, all things considered. That
Mm-hmm.
Hiccup thinks he's doing the dragons good by bringing them with them and providing for them and stuff, but at the same time deny these creatures their freedom is not. how much is he different from like someone like Grimmel or Drago?
Well,
Mm,
I think it's really poignant, right? That the scene ends on a shot of Toothless, and it looks like there's
yeah.
cage doors to this little love nest, right? Like, sure, those
Mhm,
cage doors might be open and they can go in and out whenever they please, but it still does look like a cage nonetheless, right? It's very
mhm.
much very obvious symbolism there that what they're trying to do, right?
Yeah, and that also kind of leads into the fact that like how similar Hiccup and Grimmel are, because there are plenty of similarities between the two, be it the connection to the Night Furies and how they like and how they got their reputation going thanks to their connection to the Night Furies. So this scene also kind of helps it set up that you know one one wrong step and Hiccup could end up being just as bad as Grimmel.
Mm-hmm.
And I also like that, Hiccup does bring up the like Stoic's line of a chief protects his own, and Valka does tell him, but the dragons are not our own. Like dragons are not pets. Dragons are not. They're they're living beings. We should treat them as such. I like that. It gives this world a bit because a lot of people who watch this movie from
I still say it feels off coming from Volka personally.
if anything, you say that, but at the same time, I think as someone who lived with these creatures for 20 years, I think she's the one to see them more as their own independent creatures than pets.
It might just be my own personal hang up. But I do think, yeah, I don't know. I can't really tell you why, personally, as of right now, but I really think it feels a little bit off coming from Volka, personally. And I don't think the scene is meant as a pet thing either, but maybe that's just me. But then again, the way they are showing it, the way Hiccup built the quote unquote love nest, you might be right on the pet idea. Like I get it, just not sure if I agree with it.
Yeah, this might be an interesting. Like people who listen tell us, do you think Valka is the right character for this kind of scene, or do you want to see someone else? Let's see this. Anyway, are we done with the Captain versus Protector?
I will say, right, getting to see Cloud Jumper walk into the scene and kind of what looks like give Toothless a bit of a hard time, like,
Mhm.
is a little bit funny, right? I think personally,
Yeah.
like you see this, what I assume is a big smile on his face as he's kind of giving Toothless a hard time with what the nest looks like and all that. I think that's
Yeah.
kind of fun and silly,
Mhm.
so I enjoyed that a little bit. And again, like the nest is just a little neat, touch of this is Hiccup being Hiccup and how he thinks things should work and how they actually end up working are two very different things.
Mhm. Yeah. Again, this is also plays into the entire, that while there is a good, an important kind of, and also interesting conversation going around in the foreground, we have some dragon interaction in the background,
Well, they
which
also
is
have
always fun.
Astrid in the background as well, and Gobber in the background doing like little small lines and other little small
Mm.
tidbits of things, and seeing this interaction happening and
Yeah.
all that.
Yeah, that actually kind of made me laugh when Hiccup shows Toothless like the perfect views they have, and Gobber is like randomly walking besides the window.
And he just looks over, it's like, what in the yeah, and just walks off
Mm.
crumbling. That was fun.
Yeah. Hmm.
This is a scene I think I would have liked to have seen animated to some degree, especially with all of the the light things with all the different dragons in them, and as it spins around in the room, I think that would have been really you know cool to see, because as an animation thing, I think that would have been really nice to see, right? A really beautiful piece of
Hmm.
animation, I think that would have been. But at the same
Yes.
time, there's a lot of beautiful bits of animation within this movie. So, checks and balances, I suppose. We don't really need another scene that can show off how good our lighting animation is when we have all these other scenes that already show off how good our lighting animation is. So,
Hmm. Yeah, fair enough. So next scene, spy mission.
mm-hmm.
I will say right now, the name of the scene has barely anything to do with the scene itself.
Well, no, because it is like a scene of Astrid and Volka flying to what I assume is Berk to find out that
Yeah.
Berk was burned down to the ground. Now, if I'm not mistaken, in the movie and in the scene previously, Protector versus Captor, the scene was, Volka talks about her and Eret going off to fly off to Berk and find out what
Yeah.
happened to Berk. And in the movie, it's also Volka and Eret that also fly off, right?
Hmm.
If I'm not mistaken. So this is definitely something different.
Actually, in the final movie, I think it's just Volka
Oh, it
that
might just
flies
be.
up to see
Okay.
she, they weren't been followed
Either
after they
way,
left.
either way, it's definitely. I assume Spy Mission was something that was probably an earlier concept, right? Because it's
Probably.
Astrid and Volka, and then eventually we move on to Volka and Eret, and eventually move on to just Volka being the one who leaves.
Hmm. So yeah, but
I do
aside from
wonder,
that,
like,
mm,
since it's looking at this, it seems like one of their big things was give Volka something to do that kind of takes her away from the scene. So it makes it feel like they weren't exactly sure what to do with Volka a lot of the times. Because you have this scene that shows Volka and Astrid having left. You have the scene before this that shows Volka and Eret having left and came back. So it does seem like, and then we have the main movie where it's just Volka by herself, having gone off to see what the Armada and Grimmel is up to. And it seems like, one of their big things was, to me, this makes it come off as they weren't exactly sure how to make Volka interact with Hiccup. And it seems like they might have been having some problems at getting that to work within the movie. So that's why they kept coming up with ways to have her not be around as much or have her interact with other characters. Because this interaction with Astrid, getting back to this particular scene, is actually really good, I feel.
hmm and this also something I want to see from Volga, and it's an interaction between her and Astrid, because and again the movie kind of gives us this, that as Hiccup's mom, Volka sees exactly how much of a good influence Astrid has on Hiccup, and that Hiccup would listen to Astrid more than he would basically anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
But it is nice to see them actually talk about the topic of a wedding. You
Yeah.
know.
And it shows, right, that, Astrid's the one who's willing, but she doesn't know if Hiccup is ready, right? Like, it kind of, again, it's a good little talk between the two, like a kind of mother, stepmother and, you know, not
You
stepmother,
know.
not stepmother, but, mother-in-law and
But
daughter-in-law
yeah,
scene.
exactly. Yeah.
That's the words I'm looking for, brain. But yeah, like, I think this is a really good scene between the two. And I think it does work, and it's something that I wouldn't have minded seeing, but I can understand why it's not there, I guess I could say.
Yeah, I get it. But then again, we also have, so just a fun talk. I would like to see this, but I also understand why they removed it. But it does give out some insight about exactly what Hiccup did take from Valka and what he took from Stoic, for example. And then there's also the entire thing of Berk being destroyed,
Yeah, this
which
is
again
the
I
first and only scene where we actually get to see that, Burke was destroyed. Burke was, attacked and it was burnt to the ground and stuff like that, or it is burning in this scene. And then we see the Armada off in the distance away from the Burke, sailing away, stuff like that. Like, the only scene we see of Burke in the actual movie is of the Armada showing up, no one being there, and Grimmel saying, and then Grimmel going and talking with the Armada about how, yes,
yeah.
but this is exactly what we want. This is what I planned. They're falling exactly into my hands, right? But we don't see them
Uh,
do anything to Burke within that scene. It seems like they just show up, No one's there. They get a little bit upset. They have a talk, and then they just leave. And Burke's just kind of
Yeah, it's
abandoned.
just there. Yeah, it's just there.
So this shows like
Oh.
I think this goes a little bit to what when we talked about when we did our review of the third movie originally and had it and had it came on and talked about how it didn't really feel like there was any permanence to the Armada within the world, like they weren't really doing anything. This is
Mhm.
I think this would have helped to show that the Armada had an influence on this world, that when they went somewhere they changed it, right? I think this
Mhm.
would have shown that somewhat, and this could have helped alleviate some of those problems with the Armada feeling somewhat nebulous, because then it would have
And
showed.
again, it would have showed that again, you could kind of make the argument you can't really go back to the old Berg with ships because it's too far away, but it would help, put like just to close the chapter that this Berg is gone. We have a new Berg now that and we need to focus on
Well,
making that thrive
well,
instead of worrying about the old one.
well I mean,
It will get.
it shows that Burke isn't the place; it's the people, right? Like something I think the
True,
movie does
but
bring up as well. But I get what you're coming
mhm,
from, though. Like it does show like it's put an end to that. Again, like you said, it's put an end to that chapter of Burke's life. Like they've moved house, they've moved home. This is their new place
mhm,
now. Like it does kind of put a nice pin in that idea, I guess you could say. And I agree.
mhm. Okay. Anything else to add on to Spy Mission?
No.
Well, then, with that being said, our next scene, and probably the scenes that most people are going to take away from all these deleted scenes, are the
And probably the scenes
flashback.
that I would say are the scenes that people would want actually in the movie and fully animated the most.
Mhm. Because
And I
these
can agree.
are stoic flashback scenes, and the first one is Mind Before the Sword. Um, I'll probably be on the less popular side of this. I get why people would like to see these animated. I really do, but this specific scene kind of feels like it really has no. It doesn't feel like it has a purpose, in my opinion.
I think it does, but I don't think it has a purpose with the movie we got necessarily. I don't think it
Yeah.
necessarily adds to what we know. I guess you could say it adds to what we know in the sense that, Hiccup got his smarts. Hiccup acted more smart. Hiccup decided to, Hiccup's this bleh. Hiccup's this person who's smarter than everyone else, right? Like he tries to think
Mhm.
before he acts, right? And I think it's really interesting to show that he apparently learned that from Stoic, right? Like that his think before you act, his think before I make a plan or make a decision, right? And think
Mhm.
before I jump into things. Like he gets that from Stoic. Stoic's the one who taught him that. I think it's interesting to bring that up, and apparently, that is kind of, and I guess we could, even though these scenes aren't necessarily within the movie, I think we can take them as canon, as this is the idea Dean had for his story. Like this is the idea that Dean had for his character and how he wanted them to develop, right? Like this
Mhm.
is a part of that,
Uh,
even if we
it,
don't
you
see it
know,
within the movies. And I think
yeah,
it's
exactly.
interesting to
Yeah,
show that, but again, I just don't think it works with the movie we got,
when
because
I say
we
like
don't
when I
really
say
need
I
to see Hiccup be. We don't really need to see where Hiccup may have learned his smarts from, because we already know Hiccup is smart, that he does think before he acts, right? That he doesn't go to the sword immediately. He uses his brain first, right?
Mhm. Yeah, and this is something that I do want to clarify. When I say I don't necessarily think this scene would work for the movie. Keep in mind that it's not a bad scene by any
No,
means,
no.
and it's not a bad scene or something. It's just find a place where it could fit in the movie. Like when we have the first flashback of Stoic showing Hiccup Berk and talking about the hidden world, that works because we then flash forward to scene Hiccup as chief actually thinking about going to find that place.
Mm-hmm.
And when we see the second flashback of Stoic telling Hiccup about letting go of Valka and how hard it is, it comes right before Hiccup thinks about letting Toothless go back to the Eden World and and
Correct me
stay
if
there.
I'm wrong. It's you've watched the movie more than I have at this point, so it's a little bit harder for me to remember. Hiccup
Yeah,
doesn't talk. Like young Hiccup doesn't talk in either of those flashbacks, does he?
he does.
He does. Okay, never mind then.
Like in the first in the first scene on Berk, like he when Stoic when Stoic tells him about the Eden World, he asks them even Night Furies, and Stoic tells them especially Night
Okay.
Furies, those are scary, and and then in the second one, he does ask Stoic about if he's going to get them another mom because
That is
Valka is
right.
not around,
You are right.
and
Okay.
yeah.
It's much less talking than what we get out of these two scenes in particular, especially
Oh
the
yeah,
second one that we'll get to in a bit.
Mhm. Yeah, one thing I do like about this scene, like people might gonna argue with me about this, but basically, what Stoic and Hiccup are playing, one could bet it's Maces and
Yeah,
Talons.
it's Maces and Talons. I don't think there's any argument here. I think it's very much Maces and Talons.
Hmm. Which could have been another small nod to the show, which could have been fun, but
I would say Maces and Talons is a game that not necessarily the show came up with, but like the show's creators talked a lot about how they had I guess you'd say the How to Train Your Dragon Bible that Dean had kind of
Mhm.
created for the world of How to Train Your Dragon, right?
Yeah, basically every show has a Bible, so we
Mm-hmm.
just provided them. Yeah.
So I would say that maybe I can't be 100% certain on this, but maybe Dean came up with this beforehand, right? And the show decided, hey,
Mhm.
this is really cool. Let's use this in a unique way, and so they used it and kind of surrounded Vigo with the idea of this game somewhat, and kind of
Mhm.
went into what the game was a little bit more and showed us the game being played in a little bit too. The movie doesn't really have a way to use this game necessarily, but I think this is, one, I agree with you. I think it is a nice nod back to the shows. Two, I think it's a good way to use this game and kind of give us an introductory to it. And the fact that,
Mhm.
and just build up, and again, build up the world a bit more and kind of say, like, hey, this is a thing that exists within this world. And it just builds it up a bit more. But again, also at the same time, it's like, this is probably the only way you would find to introduce this into the movie, and even then, it doesn't necessarily fit. It is a cute and adorable scene, Stoic being a father to Hiccup and showing, him teaching Hiccup about, the future of becoming a chief and how he should think more instead of just acting and stuff like that. But it would you would be hard pressed to find a place to make this scene fit in and make it feel like it belongs with the rest of the
Which,
movie.
now that I think about it, talking about Race to the Edge for a bit, they kind of had this talk in Race to the Edge as well. Now that I think about it,
Do what
like
now?
they did, Stoic and Hiccup had this talk in Race to the Edge as well about picking your fights
Mm-hmm.
and
They did.
stuff. They they did have this talk, so yeah. Which is, on the one hand, it's kind of I know what I'm going to say now, that there are people who only watch the movies and ignore the show, but at the same time, it could have been it could have been a bit repetitive if you did see the show. Not that it's a bad thing by any means, like
Well,
because
I don't
again,
think the show should
the,
have any bearing on it, whether it's done it or before or
yeah,
not.
yeah, that's what I'm saying though. That on the one hand, I can see how people who watch the show might not see the point of this because we had this talk between these two characters,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, in the context of the films, we never really saw anything like that. So imagine if you are one of my friends, for example, who only saw the movies and didn't really talk. I think out of my real life friends, uh, I'm the only one who saw the show, like, entirely.
Mm-hmm. That's fair.
So
It's
so
definitely
so
not.
to
I get it.
so to them, watching this on the DVD could be a nice bonus.
Oh, absolutely. I would agree.
With that said, the final scene we have on our plate is your responsibility. I do want to start by saying that I think if I have to guess here, this was supposed to be this scene was supposed to be instead of was supposed to like be it, should it have been in the movie. It was supposed to be in instead of the scene where Stoic talks to young Hiccup about Volca.
Um,
Just a guess.
I would probably agree, right? Like, I think it definitely feels like it might have fit within that area somewhere. If not there, it definitely feels like they had it. This feels like one of those scenes that they had a kind of lead into from, the present back to the past, right? Like this feels like one of those lead in, like I'm remembering this things. Like this feels like they had more of a lead into it, and it probably would have been around in that area. I would agree.
Yeah. Um, in that sense, do you prefer? Would you have preferred to see this scene or the scene we ended up getting?
I really like this scene. Again, I think if there's any scene out of the all of the deleted scenes, this is probably going to be the most popular one, right? I firmly
Mhm.
believe like if you did a poll
Because
of
of the bird.
and not just that, it's probably because of Hiccup and because of all of it, really. I would say, but I like this
Yeah,
would definitely be the most popular one that I think you would probably hear the most people say. I want to see this animated. I want to see this in full with all of the
because I think out of all the scenes where I think this is the one scene that kind of ties into Toothless the
yeah.
most, which is why people are so over it, and I get why. I was pretty over it as well when I saw it for the first time. And regarding if I would have preferred the scene we got, with Stoic talking about letting go of Alka, or this, I think I'll go with the scene we got by a hair, just because it's a bit less explicit.
Mm.
It's a bit more in your face about it, which I appreciate, because when you see the bird and Stoic says, and Stoic says, once it heals, it could go back to the wild where it belongs, and it's like you're obviously talking about Toothless.
Yeah.
In and so you can also get it in the scene where they talk about Valka, sure, but at the same time, it's not. It's less in your face about it.
Yeah, the I guess you'd say the moral of the story is very much like not all wild animals can be kept as pets permanently. Some of them do have to be released back into the wild, because that's more where they belong than with humans, right? Like I think that's definitely the moral behind it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
this is way more, I guess you'd say, obvious about it. This way more in your face about it. Kind of going back to that discussion I brought up in when we talked about the season 2 of the Dragon Prince, right? Where I said maybe that's not a bad thing anymore. Maybe we need to be more obvious, because it seems like subtlety tends to pass over too many people's heads nowadays in terms of getting a moral or an idea across within a movie or a
Mm-hmm.
show or something like that.
Yeah.
So, but that's in a different discussion, entirely in and of itself, right? But
Mm-hmm.
looking at just the scene itself, I think this is the again. I think this is the one that if you asked me, I would probably want to see this one most animated with all of the you know flashiness that the movie brings, right? Like the full animation
Mm-hmm.
suite and all that.
Yeah.
But it's also the
And
one that
seeing the Berk forest from the first movie animated with the new technology
mm-hmm,
could have looked great.
mm-hmm. But at the same time, it's also something that I'm not. I don't feel like I lost not getting it in that kind of sense, right? Because I think what we did get is a little bit better and just does flow better. Like this is another one of those scenes where if you asked me where would I put this into the movie, I would have to sit back and say I honestly don't know. I don't think there's a place for it necessarily.
Like in the movie we got, because
Yeah,
again
this is true.
we do believe that if it was supposed to be in a movie, it would have replaced the scene where they talk about Valka right after they escape the Eden World.
Or it would have had
But
an entirely different scene after it or precluding it or what have. Like this could have been, like this scene could have came from a much different movie when this scene was
Mhm.
thought of and being worked on and storyboarded, right? Like the movie could have been much different
Yeah.
for this scene.
Because you need to understand that when a script is finished, they pretty much storyboard the script as the script is being written.
Mm-hmm.
From what I know, because they do need to sell because they do need to sell the concept to the producers, and so it it probably it was probably an earlier draft, which was might have been different. I could actually see this scene working in a version of the movie that had the alternative opening.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree.
Hmm.
Yeah, I will ask, right? Like, since we kind of get to hear way more of the voice acting for Young Hiccup, what do you think about Young Hiccup in these scenes compared to like the movie? Because the movie you get like one or two lines, and it's really hard to judge. From this, we
But
can judge a bit
I
more. What
think
do you think about
I
Young
do
Hiccup?
I Mhm. Yeah, I did mention in our review that I do like Young Hiccup's dialogue because it does feel like a kid. He's
Mm-hmm.
written like he has lines that a kid would say, like when he talks about night furies and goes, "Those are scary,"
Mm-hmm.
or when Stoic tells him like, "You should be asleep," and he goes, "I was thirsty," and stuff. Uh, you know, he talks like a kid,
Yeah, I
which
agree.
people are like, oh no shit, he's a kid. But you know how hard it is nowadays to find kids that sound like kids in movies, animated and live
Yeah,
action.
I'd agree. Like, it's
So
definitely you're hard pressed to find. Hollywood never treats a kid like a kid would act in
mhm.
real life more often than not.
Yeah. So in that sense, he still felt like a kid in those scenes. Like I like when Stoic actually beats him in the Maces and Talons game, and he goes, "But I like my chief," and the way he stands up for the bird, you know, he's a kid, and not only is he a normal kid, but you can also tell that this kid will grow up to be the Hiccup we know, and
Mm-hmm.
so I like that. I love Young Hiccup.
So this just added to that idea for you.
Hmm.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
fair enough. I was gonna say I think personally from the movie we didn't really get enough of him line wise to really give me a definitive yeah I like this or I think this kind of sold me on it a lot more, right? Because we get a lot more from Young Hiccup and the VA who voices him
Yeah.
and all that, and it feels a lot
I,
more.
I will say though that I do hope some producer would see both the actual movie we got and those deleted scenes and would give this kid more work because I would like to see this kid go places.
Yeah, he did good.
Hmm.
I do agree.
These were basically all the deleted scenes.
That is it.
So, so kind of a quick question to sum this up. One scene you would want to see in the movie we got, and one
Hmm.
scene that you think we're better off without
One scene I think we're better off without from these deleted scenes or from the movie in general.
from the deleted scenes.
One scene I think we're better off without is probably the montage of the automatic tail fin being made. I think we don't really need that. I think we're better off without it. I get the idea behind it. I understand why it was animated. I understand why it got as far as it did. But I think that's probably the one that is the least necessary, is the least needed, and is, in my opinion, the least wanted. One
Hmm.
scene that I would like to see within the movie that I think would fit and would belong the most is probably, I would say, the scene with Valka and Astrid feels like it
Hmm.
fits the most and feels like it could belong the most. And I think that's the scene that I would probably say, like, this is the scene I'd want to see the most. I don't know if it's the scene I'd say, bleh. I don't know if I would say it's the scene I want to see most animated. I think I'll agree with many others in saying that I would probably like to see the flashbacks more so than this scene. But I think this one belongs the most and makes the most sense within the movie that we got.
Hmm. Yeah, okay. Fair enough. So yeah, scene I think we can do without is again automatic tail for the reasons you said. And scene I would like to see probably protector versus captor because I do
Sure.
like I do like the ideas that come up from this scene.
I like how we
And
both picked the Volca scenes to say that, we would like to see them most within the movie.
yeah, well, yeah, Valka is an interesting character.
I would like to see more of her.
Mm-hmm. Like I said, Dean, give me that Valka spin-off. Just saying. Um, okay, so with that said, I think that's any you want to say before we close discussion?
this, these were fun to watch. I enjoyed
Mhm.
it.
So with all that said, that's been all for this episode of the Berkcast. We hope you enjoyed. What deleted scenes from the Hidden World do you like the best? Which scene would you keep outside, and what scene would you like to see added to the final movie? Whatever your thoughts are, you can tell us all about that in the comment section below, on our Tumblr where we are known as Berkcast Team, on our Twitter where we are known as Berkcast with a capital B, capital C, and you can find all of us on the How to Train Dragon Valhalla Discord server. So until next time, I was HC,
I've been Wolf.
and we will talk to you all next time. Take care.
Bye bye.